So this is part two of the Battle of Marathon, where we're going to actually look at the battle itself. If you haven't done so already, watch part one so that you can sort of understand the tactical differences and also the sort of armor and weaponry differences. So, we're going to sort of track this through Herodotus, who, I mean, he claims to be an eyewitness. It's probably unlikely that he was an eyewitness to it, but he would have collected the information from a wide range of sources, either eyewitnesses who fought on the battlefield, or people who, heard this story of great Greek victory and have passed it down, through word of mouth. So ultimately, this is the battlefield, and I mean the Persians are sort of further back along this ridge here, but you can see it's set up. So there's a swamp on the sort of more northern side. The Greek forces have spread themselves quite thin across this ridge, and the Persians, sort of in their 25,000, are sitting in this sort of back area here. Quite a lot of their boats have actually sailed to the south, and that was covered in the last video. And they're sort of down to a skeleton crew, very minimal ships. We're looking at about 100 of the 600 in total that have actually stayed behind. So in terms of a full retreat, it's impossible for the Persians to, save the entire population. We're probably looking at close to 5,000 maximum that can be collected at this time. So the Athenians spread themselves thin, not tactically smart, because they need to have that sort of well-developed phalanx line in order to hold the brunt of the force. But there's no way for the Athenians to actually match the length of the Persian army, given that it's sitting at about 25,000 and they're at about 10,000. So Miltiades deliberately keeps this middle section quite weak in order to sort of encourage a push from the Persians going straight for the middle, because his plan is to then have his two flanks pushed down to the side, and you can see it through these arrows here, pushed down to the side in what's called a double envelopment. Okay, and by doing that, he actually encourages the Persians to take this front, allow his troops to wrap around, and pincer them in between. So we'll track through Herodotus's argument, Herodotus's words, I mean. So one result of the Athenian troops before the battle was the weakening of the center. So this is weakened by the efforts to extend the line sufficiently, so from length to length, over the whole Persian front, and the Persian front sort of sits in this area here. The two wings were strong, so wing 1 and wing 2 are strong, but the line in the center was only a few ranks deep, so it's about 3 or 4 ranks deep, as opposed to what it should be, which is about 8 to 10. The preliminary sacrifice, so this sacrificing the strength of this, promising success, the word was given to move the Athenians' advance at a run towards the enemy. So the Athenians are actually running at the enemy, not less than a mile away. The Persians, seeing the attack developing at the double, so they were, seeing it from the distance, prepared to meet it. So they actually start to march forward towards the enemy, who are not less than a mile away. So obviously there's archers firing arrows, but because of the speed that the Athenians are sort of pushing up on the Persians, the arrows aren't as effective. So the Persians, seeing this attack, prepared to meet it, thinking it a suicidal madness, and that's really nice sort of emotive language from Herodotus, for the Athenians to risk an assault with so small a force, only 10,000 in number, rushing in with no support from either cavalry or archers. So nevertheless, the Athenians came on, and they closed with the enemy along the line, and you can sort of see the strong outside. So the Athenians came on, closed with the enemy along the line, and fought in a way not to be forgotten. This is really great description from Herodotus. They were the first Greeks so far as I know. So he's referring to, he hasn't heard of a phalanx actually running at an enemy before, to charge at a run, and the first who dared to look without flinching at Persian dress. So the Persians were feared at this stage, but the Athenians, without wavering, just charged at them. And the men who wore it, for until that day came, no Greek previously to this battle of Marathon, no Greek could hear even the word Persian without terror. So, to finish off Herodotus' description of this battle, they fought a long time at Marathon. In the center of the line, the foreigners prevailed. So, against this front center, the Persians are actually winning, and you can see them sort of forcing the Athenians back, and tripling them in number. So where the Persians were arrayed, so in the center of the line, the foreigners prevailed, where the Persians were arrayed. So they were sort of fighting frantically. The foreigners prevailed there and broke through in pursuit inland. So they started to break through this line in order to push towards Marathon. On each wing, so this is wing 1 and wing 2, the Athenians and the Plataeans prevailed, so they were starting to win. And you can see all these dots represent a lot of the Persians who start to break ranks and run back to the boats. In victory, they let the routed foreigners flee. So they actually let these lines run back to the boats and run free. Okay, because then the two flanks do a double envelopment. So they actually wrap around here and wrap around here. These back ranks start to fill into the lines here. So the Athenians prevailed, then followed the fleeing Persians and struck them down. So these Persians are completely surrounded and killed to the last. Then the Athenians start turning on the boats and start running towards the enemy. A lot of the Persians have actually fled also into this marshland, because over here and sort of up into this region here is where a lot of the camp, the Persian camp was, and a lot of the boats still remain in this sort of pocket here. I know this isn't a great map. It's unlikely that the boats would have been here, more likely to be in this region here. The Athenians prevailed, then followed the fleeing Persians, struck them down. When they reached the sea, they demanded fire and laid hold of the Persian ships. So they actually start setting the boats on fire. And using a lot of the bows and arrows that the Persians, they'd confiscated from the Persians, to actually fire arrows at the Persian boats made of wood. So according to the statistics, Herodotus describes 6,400 Persian bodies counted on the battlefield, and an unknown how many perished in the swamps. So we know of, or at least this is according to Herodotus, 6,400 Persian bodies, compared to the Athenians who only lost 192 and the Plataeans who lost 11. And these are the burials. So Athens and the sort of war heroes are buried on the same spot in Marathon, and the Plataeans side by side. And here we have a Corinthian helmet taken from the battlefield. It now resides, I think, in Canada, but this is from the Battle of Marathon. And so you can see the sort of armor that the Athenian soldiers were wearing. So what are the results then of Miltiades' push? So some of the fleeing Persians were forced into the marsh, and so we know the marshland sort of up to the north area here. The Persian fleet, which was sailing around here, by the time of the Battle of Marathon, they're actually only at this cape here. So they haven't managed to circumvent and sort of try to take the port and then cross into Athens yet. So the Persian fleet are sailing around. They're sitting here upon the defeat of Marathon. And so some of the victors from this army, so the Athenians, then start to push back towards Athens. Ignore these, this is like modern day running. But they then start to push back to Athens to hold this line. Because their expectation is once the Persian fleet returns, they can hold them at Athens and defeat them once and for all. So the army doubled back. Once the Persian fleet arrives at the Athenian port, the Athenians are actually there waiting for them. The Persians end up docking off the side for a while, and then they give up and actually sail home. And that marks the end, the official end of Marathon. But in terms of the significance of this battle, Athens, not just Sparta, is seen as this great military power. So the reputation of the Athenians was so enhanced from this that they become sort of a major force in Greece for the remaining 200 years. So it then allows, and this will segue into when we look at the Second Persian War, but Athens becomes this powerhouse where a lot of the other Greek nations actually bind together with Athens because they trust them. Ancient poets at the time are describing Hellas, so Hellas being Athens, as a city of godlike men. And ultimately, this sort of is that psychological boost that the Athenians need, and it loomed in the psyche of these men. They remember that forever, and that reputation is passed on. It's almost like the Anzac legend in Australia today. And it continued the reputation into the Second Persian War, which happens 10 years later. According to modern historians, and these are some excellent quotes, ones that could be your kicker sentence in your conclusion, or it could be sort of something that summarizes the reasons why the Greek was so victorious at this battle. So this sparked the start of the golden age of Athens. So from this point on, it goes from strength to strength. Their victories endowed the Greeks with a faith in their destiny that was to endure for 3 centuries. So the Athenian almost empire after that has this mentality as we are forged through war. We're the first Greek city-state to have ever beaten the Persians. And we beat them before the Spartans even showed up. And the phalanx formation, and this is a great one from Holland, the phalanx formation referencing the battle style that the Athenians and the Plataeans used against the Persians in Marathon. The phalanx formation was now shown to be a potentially devastating weapon.